here to share just some of my humble experience. What I did want to do was start with, just this big topic. Heidi earlier talked about ACD, the ASEAN. Really, you'll hear a lot of talk about emerging markets, right? About how it is important for all of us to win in those markets. I wanted to touch a little bit about what we meant by global readiness, really. I think as HR practitioners, it's important for us, sort of as the kingmakers of the organization, to know, what's happening to our organization. Given these challenges, what new capabilities are just so essential, and in OD, that's what we look at, right? Org capability. And looking at where we want to take the organization, we identify the imperatives and therefore realign, reinvent ourselves so that we can be relevant, right? Because we measure, as Hans said. So what I wanted to do is touch a little bit about what's happening. I'm gonna paint a picture of, just to keep it simple in my head, the two kind of interesting players here, right? So the global greats who are trying to conquer the new territories, the emerging markets, and the great global challengers, companies in China, in Turkey, in Eastern Europe, as well as the Philippines, who are making a name now for themselves, right? So we're gonna take a look at what's happening, because I would conjecture that we probably belong to either of these, right? And we are all challenged by that. After I talk a little bit about what's going on, I'm gonna talk about, from my insight, what is happening to the organization and where we need to take it. So I'm gonna touch on 5 organizational capabilities that I think we really need to build and support. And the final part, my favorite part, is the HR story. So therefore, how do we do that, right? As HR people, practitioners. And I will share a little bit about our journey, our very exciting journey in AG&P. Okay. So let me get on with it. So I think this is not news anymore, right? In fact, we know that the world is really moving to be dominated by the developing world. If you think about it, just look at that number, 1 billion consumers, right? And so that's truly very exciting. You have here a scene in China, everyone lining up as Louis Vuitton opens. That's how it is already. I wanted to also kind of define, so that we're on the same page, what we mean by emerging markets. So it's really a location, a country that is ripe for growth. There's a market that will pay. There's a capital market that will provide a financial currency to keep businesses growing. And there is a government that is very keen to make these industries grow. So my topic is HR's perspectives in getting global ready, right? So when we talk about global readiness, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's how to win in these emerging markets. But I did italicize there, sustainably, right? And I'll probably explain a little later. So this is our world right now, and maybe I could just pause to check with everybody. In your companies right now, maybe we can see a show of hands. How many of you, your management team, you yourselves, how many of you prioritize or are thinking about seriously succeeding in emerging markets? How many of you? Expanding your product and your market. And of these number, I think there's a fair amount. How many of you feel ready, confident to win in this market? Can we have a show of hands? Okay, we have a couple, right? I think that's the same question earlier, right? With Heidi. Are we ready is the big question. And we're not alone. This is a survey done by the Boston Consulting Group. They saw that while 7 out of 10 executives today lose sleep about winning in the new markets, evolving their product line, expanding their business, only 1 in 10 actually feel ready. BCG has a survey. I think you can take it, and this is already an assessment, really, of how ready a company is. I think some of those we just heard about convergence and stream, right? So M&A, R&D, how to source, Heidi's experience, right? Best cost, country sourcing, etc. So this is upon us. So let me just describe, the two players that really fascinate me. One is, what is that? McDonald's where? In Russia, right? So how do you do that? How do you sustain that? And this is Windows where? China, right? Where you have Lenovo. So what they're discovering, global leaders, global brand leaders, is that the old formulas don't seem to work just as well. It's not that simple. Whereas maybe they are used to the premium market, they go into a market, let's just say the Philippines, go to Makati, you have kind of a premium market, but you'll realize that after a while, you need to go to the next level, to the next tier, the middle class market, right? And maybe to the bottom of the pyramid where there's a lot of potential. So the whole multinational shampoos becoming sachets, right? So it's not that simple. And to succeed requires a lot of thinking, planning, and readiness. You'll also have, on the other hand, very interesting news every day, right? Of how Asian tigers are actually taking over the world. I mean, did we ever think, right? That Jaguar, the European brand, right, will be an Asian company. More and more every year, when we take a look at the top Fortune 500, we have at least one-fifth of that is already coming from Asia. However, it's also interesting, and I don't have the time, but I think it's good to think about the fact that even as the emerging global challengers are making headway, they are also beginning to experience a lot of challenges already, right? So maybe the initial boom was very successful, but sustaining, right? In fact, BCG calls it the end of the easy growth period for the Asian tigers. So we cannot relax, right? These times are constantly getting more exciting. My sharing about HR and its role will spin up from this, right? Because I was just asking myself, so what? So what, right? And I kind of chanced upon these imperatives or new mandates for each of the types, depending on the type of global challenger you are. And I think we kind of, some of these are familiar. Global brand leaders, we need to understand, let's say, I mean, have you gone to McDonald's in China? Right, those who have visited, or McDonald's in Singapore, you'll see, right? I mean, there is a struggle to actually define the palette, right, that will sell, and those are the changes. And so we need to really adapt to the environment. How do you, as a global great, with your headquarters somewhere in the US or in UK, decide fast, right? Nimble decision-making and quick response. How do we deal with, gifts that are given on Christmas versus, different policies in our company? So we need to really understand as global brand leaders how to play in the new markets. On the other hand, global challengers, and I really think my company, for example, is in that game. We need to think about how we can differentiate ourselves beyond just cheaper labor, right, or lower cost. We need to really stay in the game by innovating, being very efficient, productive, ensuring that we have best quality, etc. When we play in the global arena, especially in our business, there's a lot of technical knowledge. We have to think about, fabrication, HVAC engineering. You have very, very niched technical knowledge, and a lot of times we don't have that in the Philippines, right? So we need to, at least, at the beginning, get our expats, and how do we leverage that? How do we get the right expats, right? How do we retain them? Those with technical knowledge abroad, how do we bring them back? Okay, how do we want them to How can we convince them to stay? Etc. So these are new frontiers, okay? So that's what's happening. And so I was just asking myself, what are the capabilities? So let me share some of them with you here. I think you can relate to some of them, right? I will define them one by one. So I think organizations that will win, that will display readiness, need to have these competencies or capabilities. Let me talk about that. Availability. So we've talked a lot about recruitment, having the right people, the right time. I also wanted to add and underscore supply chain. I think that's a very key. When we say availability, it's not just people, right? It's really end-to-end to enable our business. But and when we talk about people, at least for our space, and I would think for large volume industries like the call center industry, it's how you do predictable supply of talent. How do you design a process such that you can guarantee that if you build it, they will come, right? We were asked, for example, to move our targets, we hire welders primarily, right? Because we fabricate steel, and our target in April was 200, and suddenly after a management meeting, it was 700, and we had to 1 month. So I negotiated, can I make it 40 days? So anyway, I'll tell you the story right there. We had to have this big campaign of 440. Where on earth do we find that? These are Australian skilled Filipino welders in the Philippines. So how do we produce that? Ability, I think I did mention that a bit. Global standards. I have stories there later. So I think in other industries you also have that already. Agility. How do we not stay with what we've been doing and constantly try to see if there's a simpler way of doing things? Scalability. How do we ramp in a very timely manner? And how do we do that not just one shot, but every time, right? And so I highlighted institutionalized core processes. So if you have a recruitment process, if you have an offboarding process, then you have to keep using it, right? Otherwise, it'll be too expensive and tedious. So how do you build in a mechanism for quick action and repetition? And of course, no need to belabor. How do we do all this profitably? So I tried to take a look and ask myself, okay, these capabilities, so which of the HR domains are challenged here, right? I wouldn't be able to go through each one. If you have time one of these days, we can have coffee, we can talk about that, but maybe I wanted to highlight a few, right? So for example, adapting more local approaches. I think we're all challenged. What is the best way to incent our workers, right? What would be incentive programs that would be meaningful to them? If you think about it, you need to really see the pulse and what really makes them happy. How do you incentivize a Vietnamese workforce, an Indian workforce, a Filipino workforce? How do you incentivize a mixed workforce? Things don't apply the same way to everybody. Decision making and quick response. How does our HR policy and procedures enable moving people from one project to the next, right? It's always a challenge. So where we're challenging ourselves with lowering that turnaround time. If we have a big project for oil and gas company A, then suddenly we win one, we need the engineers here, we need to move them. How do you do that in, okay, my partners want it under 5 days, okay? So there, the challenge to always have the procedures that are repeatable but nimble. Very hard. Okay, this is big. This is for global challengers, players who want to make it big with this new opportunity. How do we do that? I just wanted to highlight, because I think Mohan talked a lot about innovation already, operational excellence, and how we actually hire the right people. And okay, so like in our situation, for example, how do we make sure of all the things now that we need to do as HR? There's so many burning fires, right? And my team my HR director actually is tired of this line. Okay, what's our priority today? Right? Because we need to keep the eye on the ball, and it's always productivity. It will always be productivity, productivity, productivity. And so important to really be there to aid our business in order to produce greatest output at minimal input, etc. Okay, so that's the challenge. So I wanted to share with you briefly about our story, how we navigate these challenges every day. A little bit about our company. We are an old name. We actually built the Araneta Center. We built Luneta. We built the Ayala Bridge. So, in fact, my mom, who's 84, you know, when I said I was joining this company, said, "Oh, AG&P," because they knew, no? So we've evolved. We've come a long way. We're in a very exciting business. We, as Richard said, we actually produce the shell, the fabricated modules, kind of in an outsourced way, put them all together, you know, mount them on a ship, and they sail for 3 weeks and warm up the northern world. So we create the power plants in Australia, in the US, and it's Filipino talent that's doing that in a plug-and-play fashion. We have grown from 300 in 2011 to 6,600 today. It's kind of earth-shattering, and I think we're about to grow more. So, such a lot of growth, and a very strong commitment to a safety culture. As we said, you know, it's not a simple game. It's a game of global standards. So what I did want to share, I mean, if you recall earlier, you know, the imperatives or the mandate, what we need to do, and the capability that we need to build. So these are some of the things we've tried. Not really very new, but if you think about, for example, right, how to leverage local culture and approaches, and I think you guys have this. But I think what I wanted to differentiate was, at the end of the day, right, you have global caliber technical talent, but what is their joy? What is their button, right? And we continue to discover that it is being cared for in the Philippines, you know, to not become, I think, that whole campaign of you count. And so we've constantly worked on that. A proudly Filipino company that truly cares for me. Our president sets the good example. Every time there's somebody who's hospitalized, he's the first one, even on a Sunday morning, to visit the hospital. And so that's really the kind of, and we ask, you know, their personal stories and I mean, we might be big, but we don't miss out on opportunities to connect personally. This is very exciting. This is a hydro deck. So you might be wondering, how on earth do you bring like a 12,000-ton steel structure, you know, so many nautical miles away, 3 weeks on water? We have the hydro deck. This is innovation. This is how we just not rely on our fabrication business, on our manpower business, but also take a look at, you know, the end-to-end need of our customer. If we need to bring your product at your doorstep, that's kind of our customer promise. How do we do that if your country has no port? If your country has a port but has waves this high, right? A lot of places in the world have that. So we said, okay, so let's solve that. We entered a joint venture and we cracked a new product. It's a hydro deck. It's I think it's called built to lease mobile port solution. You don't have a port, we'll bring you the port. So that we can bring it on time, right? Very exciting. I think from an OD perspective, it's, at first we thought, oh, how do we do that, right? We don't have the technology here for this, right? So we had to look at a research company in the UK. We got designers from there. We got project managers from the Philippines. We got a fabrication yard in China. We brought together a team in the joint venture to run this. So pretty fascinating and very useful. Performance management and total rewards, again, to keep the eye on the ball. There's just so many things, but to stay relevant, we really need to prioritize this. This is a picture at the far right of something very recent, and June is laughing there because he's been instrumental in rolling this out. When you think about, okay, beyond low-cost advantage, how do you have, and then thinking local, right? And going back to engagement and connection. We had a not a debate, but we had a discussion, right? Because at first, when we were thinking of designing this incentive program for our skilled people, for our craft, I was going for efficiency. So I said, gift check, money na lang, no? And then they were telling, no, grocery bag. So I said, oh my God, so we have to like, you know, get suppliers to provide that, and that's going to be every Sunday. Oh my God. So, but no, they said, no, because this is important to the people in Batangas. And so, okay. So, and true enough, right? So we've launched the first one, kind of an attendance bonus, and we've brought down, okay, so 18 months already, right? So the attendance or absenteeism rate is 15%, and today it's 4%. So some of these things actually work. You will see that poster, because it's a build-up mechanism, right? So on the 6th month, if you're still no perfect attendance, you'll get a TV, okay? And it's big, right? It's big for them. If you do the cost benefit, it's nothing in comparison to the productivity we engender, no? Because if for every day of productivity we lose tens of thousands of dollars on liquidated damages, so versus what, the 500 peso grocery bag. So these are the things we need to think about. We have there in the middle, that's our sports fest. And I kid this picture, this is like Benetton, United Colors of Benetton. We have multinational talent in our company, as you have. We have somebody from Greece, from India, somebody from the UK, somebody from China, and Korea, I mean. And the challenge, and this is kind of, we discover counterintuitive things we didn't expect. For example, okay, when you hire expats, how do you do it? Like technical expats. And so for many months, years, the default has been to look at technical experience, right? Years of experience in oil and gas, and then all the technical. But when we recruit, we interview, we kind of underplay some things. But what we've discovered, studying the attrition patterns of our expatriate talent, we see that those who actually click with the culture, who have a Filipino wife, or who love Makati at night, they're the ones that stay. They're the ones that are happy. They're the ones that, so it's kind of reframing the way we spot talent, right? We need to take a look at those considerations. Again, predictable hiring. Because it's very hard, because you need them fast and you don't know where to find them. Okay? Training and development, this is our humble tech school, but we're very proud of it. We have, I think, 200 booths of welding stations where we do our training. We have a satellite one nearby, near our site, for scaffolding and rigging. This is for welding. And I have a story here that's my favorite when I think about this, because I also kind of handle training in one of the challenges of satisfying global standards, right? Okay, so Australian standard scaffolding, try that. Normally we have TESDA, and not even, right? Welding, how do you satisfy that? It just so happens that, and apparently that's the highest standard for welding over the UK and the American standard. So we have, I'll tell you a story about, I'll call him Pedro to disguise him, but he fascinates me, and then I really adore him. So Pedro is one of our leads, you know, in the yard, who has been with AG&P for many years, right? Because, I don't know, maybe 20 years already. So, and Pedro is the guy to call when you need to move the cranes, find scaffolding, find people for rigging, and so he's the guy. He's the guy. Now, when we won this new contract, again, it was an Australian client, so it was heartbreaking. Very hard for me to convince him about conducting a verification of competency, right? So it's kind of a process after hiring the skilled workers. We need to really pass the VOCs. And he keeps telling me, why we need this? Why we need this? I said, I've been working the crane for 35 years. They're doubting I can do this. Okay, so it's always a challenge, right? We have client there in front of us, you know, requiring us to have the training passports and all that. And I pulled him to one side and said, you know what, Pedro, it's not about you. It's not a question of your capability. We have new cranes and new parts of cranes and new gadgets inside, you know, new gauges. And so it's really more about just showing them we can do it. But it's a struggle. Again, the other day he was calling me, when is the expat leaving? So it's like, Keith, 30 more days, because we need to shut up our client. And because, of course, he cannot articulate. He might be the best at it, but there are certain things we cannot do yet, right? So, but you know, when we do our programs, we make sure that the expats have it in them to mentor, you know, to certify local, for example, scaffolding inspectors. We now have that, so that we will be able to walk on our own later, okay? Another story here. So this is business partnering. Again, that's the help desk. You know, during the lunchtime, the breaks of our workers, we bring HR to them so that, you know, because they don't really have time to. But the story I wanted to share here is this whole idea of rigor in process, rigorous processes. Remember repeatability. How do we keep doing this at the, you know, even as a local company, how do we, let's say, adopt API, American Petroleum, or ISO standards? We're very proud to say we have those accreditations. Again, another interesting, counterintuitive story is, it was just an insight that I had when I was doing this. I said, what is our secret? How are we able to do this? You can imagine, how we're very local. And then, you know, you need to pass those ISO standards. So they have done that. Fortunately, in 2011, they set the ground when we started going global. But to actually maintain compliance is another challenge, right? So I think we're very lucky in a way. We have things like, I would call a bulldog, a global compliance bulldog, or somebody, and I'll call him Juan, another favorite employee of mine. He just keeps emailing us on, submit your KPIs, submit your okay, submit. And then when we kind of deviate a little bit on our recruitment, right, you'll get a CPAR, a non-compliance, and you'll go to you and say, you did not pass through medical test for this wave. Okay, so I think the whole idea is together, as long as we have those advocates, we can maintain the rigor that we need. So that's some of the things we do. I wanted to end with these just last two slides. More, I guess, for those who are starting their journey, because I think for some of us it's too late to start doing new things, but there are 6 HR competencies required so that we can support this new global capabilities. Never missing to see the big picture. And then not stopping to say to your partners, to your boss, why are we doing this again? Okay, so to see what market you're entering, what you're trying to do, and what you're trying to drop so that you understand what's going on. Business savvy, and I think we're not really born with this, otherwise we would have been in finance or sales or marketing. But the competency here is not to stop to want to understand, not to stop to learn, to ask, okay, if you're not familiar with P&L, then what's a PLL? What's inside? And how does my work every day in generating, you know, certificate of employment and recruitment, how does that all build up to that, right? So and there, I like that, to be obsessed with doing only what is value adding. To refuse to do things that don't make sense. Agility and resourcefulness. They're boring, but very necessary. And then tenacity, I don't know if that's really a competency, but it's that never say die attitude. Again, when I said, and I want to congratulate my staff, I keep doing this, because we did achieve 400 in 50. So we did manage to bring them in. In fact, today, what's our problem? Operations is asking us to stop sending people, because they don't have the enablers on site. So it's a nice problem, right? So, and then there, the last one. And my metrics here would be, how many times do your partners call you a day? How fast do they call you from the time a problem started? not always the best thing on earth because, you know, you want your Sundays and all that. But I think if they come to you instantly, and if they, you know, they find it a joy to work with you, then I think that's, we can really be in step with them. I wanted to end with this. Lots of opportunities in the emerging market, but big responsibility for all of us. I wanted to thank everybody, and I wanted to dedicate this, this sharing to our youngest in the team. I think one of the things we all need to do is to set up our young HR practitioners to succeed. It is not easy, this world that they will enter, right? I'm speaking so old, but it's true, right? And how to constantly build those skills even when we're so busy, you know? Our two colleagues here, my favorites, youngest in our team. Every time I see them in the yard, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to sit down with you and do this mentoring. But how do we really do that and commit to setting them up to succeed? So thank you guys, and good luck to all of us.